Go ahead, sir.
All right, thank you, sir. All right, good morning, my senior colleagues and my colleagues. My paper this morning will be on formulating the theology of migrants. Now, the 2019 IOM report puts the global figure of migrants at 272 million. And this excludes internal migrants, which is put at 740 million. So which means we are having slightly over 1 billion migrants scattered all over the world, whether internal or international or external migrants. Now, this figure is putting a lot of pressure, not only on nations, but also on individual citizens of the nations, and it triggers various responses. Now, you can have mild responses to this scenario, which will be debates coming up on ethnic identity, social coherence, economic viability, law enforcement, and so on. Now, but in the negative scenario, you can have cases of communal clashes between settlers and natives. An example of this was the 1980 Modakeke crisis in Nigeria. Now, the Ife people see themselves as the natives. The Modakeke people are supposed to be migrants from Oyo who have taken up permanent residency in Ife across the ages. Now, I'm not talking about that. Now, the result of the number of migrants is also putting Christians into an uncomfortable position because people begin to wrestle theologically, socially, politically, what are we going to do with issue of migration, immigration, migration, and migrants? Now, I believe that as Christians, our beliefs and our actions are supposed to be theologically based. And whatever theology we have is supposed also to be based on Bible teachings. And there are not many resources dealing with this issue. And that's why I decided that, okay, let us look into the Bible. What does the Bible say concerning the issue of migrants? Now, most of the Bible passages we are going to look at is actually from the Old Testament laws. Now, Old Testament, there are two basic approaches which we can use: the principle approach and the paradigm approach. And the principle approach says that the law was given to a covenant people in another time, in another place, and that the church, as the new people of God, does not stand in the same relationship as the covenant people of ancient Israel. Now, so this approach holds that there is a gap or a lacuna between the Jews and the church. However, these gaps notwithstanding, there are still truths in the Old Testament laws that could be considered as universal. So this approach looks into interpreting the law, studying the law in its context, so that a kind of principle can be brought up from that law, and then we can use it for a contemporary application. Now, the paradigm approach is also close. It also sees, but the difference is that it sees God's relation to Israel as a deliberate reflection of what God wants on earth. So, we will be covering mostly the Old Testament laws, not all the laws. There are three major sections of the laws that we'll be covering. The first one is the Covenant Code, which was the law given to Moses in Exodus chapter 20, verse 22 to chapter 23, verse 19. The Holiness Code, which occurs from Leviticus chapter 17 to chapter 26, and the Deuteronomic Code, which is the reinterpretation of the Israelite law around the 7th century BC. Now, the word migrants actually does not occur in the Bible, whether you are looking at the Old Testament or you are looking at the New Testament, because the word migrant is actually a new word that came into play in the 1670s. And it was not until 1807 that it was applied to human beings. In the 1670s, it was applied only to animals. However, there are some words in the Old Testament which can be used to equate migrants. And these are the words we are going to look at. Now, excuse me. These words are variously translated in the Bible as foreigner, sojourner, or stranger. Now, there are 5 major words, and these words are Zar, Nakar, Nokri, Tushav, and Gib. Now, I'm going on to Zar. Now, Zar is one of the highly used words for a foreigner. Now, the breakdown of the occurrences of Zar is in this table. It is used 70 times. However, of all these 70 times, only 2 falls within the scope of our examination. There is one usage in the Deuteronomic Code, and there is one usage in the Holiness Code. Now, in the Deuteronomic Code, we have Deuteronomy chapter 25, verse 5, which says, if brothers dwell together, and one of them dies and has no son, the wife of the dead shall not be married outside the family to a stranger. The husband's brother shall go into her, take her as his wife, and perform the duty of a husband's brother to her. Now, if you look at the Greek parallel of the Bible, you will see that I have highlighted the word Zar. Actually, I highlighted 2 words, which is Leish Zar. Now, Ish is the normal word for a man, and Zar is the word for a stranger. Now, but if you look into this context very well, you will discover that the Zar here is actually an Israelite. The only problem is that he does not belong to the family in question. So, this is a case of an internal migrant. That's just what I want us to take here. Now, Zar, in the general usage, actually occurs mostly, it's used to mean a non-Israelite, except the 2 cases that occur within our codes. Now, the plural of Zar is Zarin, and once that is used, it is used to reflect foreign people with whom Israel had connection. So most of the time, the Zar is not actually an external migrant, except the case of an internal migrant. In fact, most of the time, the Zar occurs in close proximity to another Hebrew word, Sar, which is spelled Tsar, but in which case it means anything. Now, in the Holiness Code, Zar came up in Leviticus chapter 22, verse 10. And it says, an outsider shall not eat of a holy thing. A sojourner of the priest or a hired servant shall not eat of anything holy. Again, this case discusses the issue of who and who is qualified to eat out of the holy food, which is usually part of the offering brought to the temple and given to priests as their daily portion. And what he's saying here is that only the family of the priest. So this excludes even an internal migrant as well as an external migrant, even if there is any. Now, I'm going to the second word, Toshav. Toshav occurs only 14 times in the Hebrew Bible. 10 of these occurrences are within the Holiness Code. And out of these 10, 7 came up within Leviticus 25. Now, Leviticus 25 is important to the Jews because it is the chapter that is devoted exclusively to the discussion of the year of Jubilee. Now, out of these 14 occurrences, Toshav is not used as a substantive all by itself. It is always used along with another word. It occurred with Ger. Ger is the last word for stranger that we will examine later. And then it also occurred with Sakir. We will look at that as we look at some of these examples. And Toshav is usually translated as temporary resident or a stranger or an alien. Now, from the 14 occurrences, Toshav does not occur in the Covenant Code. It occurs only in the Deuteronomy Code and in the Holiness Code. Now, let's go on and look at the occurrences of Toshav in the Holiness Code. The first example is taken from Leviticus 22:10, which says, "An outsider shall not eat of a holy thing." Okay, I think we just discussed that up, but we are bringing it up again because it made use of the word Toshav after using the word Zar. Now, so why are these two words coming up here? Now, if Zar refers to all Israelites, as I have indicated, then the Toshav or Kohen Toshav will also refer to all Israelites. Now, these are two categories of Israelites. One of the Israelites could be a Zar and another one could be a Toshav. We will try to see the difference between these two, but these are cases of internal migrants. Now, Toshav in Leviticus chapter 25, verse 6, it says, "The Sabbath of the land shall provide for you, for yourself, your male and your female servants, your hired servants, and also the sojourner." The hired servant is a translation of the word Sakir, and the sojourner is the translation of the word Toshav Hagir. Now, again, we need to grapple with the reason why they use the two occurrences. Now, and this is basically because there is a difference between this Sakir and a Toshav. A Sakir is somebody who is employed as a hired laborer, while the Toshav lives with the employer. That's just the difference between the two of them. Now, in Leviticus 25:23, it says, "The land shall not be sold in perpetuity, for the land is mine. For you are strangers and sojourners with me." Now, in this verse, it is God that is speaking. And this verse is the most significant verse for Israel's faith, especially when it comes to socio-economic groups. And the reason is this: as far as God is concerned, every human being living on this earth are strangers. They are Toshav. Let me put this in the plural. We are Gerim with Toshavim. In other words, we are not the owners. We are only here temporarily, and we are being hired by God. In other words, God has given us whatever we have on this planet as hired out to us to trade with, and thereby we are going to give account for him. And actually, this is the basis of the tithing law, and always the reason why God calls Israel to obedience. Leviticus 25:35, it says, "And if your brother becomes poor and cannot maintain himself with you, you shall maintain him. As a stranger, as a sojourner, he shall live with you." Now again, the girl with Toshav is here is also an Israelite. It's not a non-Israeli. But the problem is, one, is not with his family, is not in his native land. So wherever he is now an internal migrant. As a result, God says, okay, let him stay with you, maintain him, hire him. It could be a daily paid worker, and it could also be a toshav, somebody you lease out your farmland with, and will come and give you account at the end of the season or at the end of the year. Now, in Leviticus 25:40, now we now have a serious issue. If your brother becomes poor and he sells himself to you, you shall not make him serve as a slave. He shall be to you a hired servant and a sojourner. He shall serve with you until the year of Jubilee. Now, let me give us a background to the understanding of the year of Jubilee. The year of Jubilee in the Israeli code or in the ancient code actually represents a 50-year occurrence. That's why many of us today adopt our 50th birthday as a Jubilee celebration. That this is where it comes from. Now, the Sabbath day takes place every 7 years. I mean, Sabbath year takes place every 7th year. And after Israel has counted 7 years, God expected that the 58th year would be declared as the year of Jubilee. Now, when this happened, there are so many rules which are contained in Leviticus 25. But one of the major rules of this year is that any Israelite who, by reason of economic reason, has become a slave to any of the non-Israelites or any of his fellow Israelites, by the year of Jubilee, the person must be freed from servitude. Even if he has sold his land as a result of his economic downturn, that land should be returned back to him. So the law here actually concerns internal migrants. Now, the third Hebrew word here is the nekar. Nekar is used 36 times in the Bible, but it occurs only once within all the 3 codes. Now, but there is a particular expression that came up 19 times. That is the expression ben nekar. Ben is an Hebrew word meaning son. But when this is used, it is used to indicate a non-Israelite completely. Now, nekar, we can now look at nekar in Leviticus 22:25. It says, neither shall you offer as bread of your God any animals gotten from a stranger, since there is a blemish in them. Because of their mutilation, they will not be accepted for you. Now, the context for this verse actually begins from verse 22, which I don't have the time to go back to. But the idea here is this. Anything that is going to be offered as a sacrifice to the Lord must not be taken from a non-Israelite. Now, we must realize that this is more than a cultural, it's a cultural issue than a liturgical issue. There are so many unclean animals that non-Israelis can eat, which God forbids the Israelites to eat. This is the law of the migrants. We will look at this later. Now, we have come to the most important word, and that word is ger. Ger is used 92 times in the Bible, and out of this 92 times, 22 came up in Deuteronomy. Now, 4 times in the Covenant Code, 13 times in the Deuteronomic Code, and 17 times in the Holiness Code. Now, in the Covenant Code, Exodus 22:26 says, you shall not wrong a stranger or oppress him. Now, the law here is very clear. Israel is warned never to oppress or wrong a stranger. The reason is given in the second part of the verse. It says, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. In other words, God is asking Israel to use our experience of the years of servitude in Egypt to be a warning to them of how not to mistreat a migrant or a stranger. Now, sorry, I didn't know when I was muted. I mean, when I was muted. Now, in Exodus 23:9, it says, "You shall not oppress a stranger. You know the hearts of a stranger, for you are strangers in the land of Egypt." Now, this is the earlier law, but here it is repeated, and here it brought in a more serious reason. It says, "You know the heart." Now, unfortunately, or let me say, the word translated heart here is the Hebrew word nephesh, which actually means soul or living. And rather than use the word heart here, the appeal here is saying that your experience as a slave in Egypt should have taught you how not to deal with migrants. Now, if you look at my notes here, I say our negative experiences in life should lead us to the right path, not to treat people the way we are being treated negatively. Exodus 23:12, it says, 6 days you shall work, and on the 7th day you shall rest. Now, here is the Sabbath law, and the girl is also protected by this law. So it's a question of even your alien servant cannot even work. Now, we are now coming to the Deuteronomic Code. The first law here is talking, I have talked about this, I said we'll come back to it. Gentiles can eat animals that is dead by itself, but for the Jews, they can't. So what God is just saying here is that if you see a dead animal, just sell it. For you can't eat it. Now, in the Deuteronomy 14:29, we have a law coming out in the context of tithing, and it's actually something that has to be taken from verse 28. At the end of every 3 years, bring all the tithe of that year's produce into your town. Now, this tithing of the farmland is given to the Levites, the fatherless, the widows, and also the girl. This is important. The girl here actually covers both internal and external migrants. So let me just move on because I'm being careful of my time. Sorry, I have a few minutes more. Let me move on to the holiness code here. Okay. Okay, this is the law again that deals with eating of animals that their blood was not let out. Okay. All right. This is one of the benevolence laws. You shall not strip your vineyard bare, neither shall you gather the fallen grapes of your vineyard. You shall leave them for the poor and for the stranger or the sojourner. I am the Lord your God. Okay, let me go on to the. Okay, I have 5 minutes. Let me just go on to my.
10 minutes.
Yes, sir.
You have 10 minutes.
10. Okay.
I'll give you extra 5. Okay.
All right. Thank you, sir. Okay. This is another law, Leviticus 25:23, where God is placing stress on the fact that we don't own the land, that we are all strangers within. Here, again, if your brother becomes poor and cannot maintain himself, you have to maintain him. This is another powerful one. If your brother is so poor and he now sold himself to a foreigner or to a stranger. Now, those of you who are his brothers have the responsibility of buying him back. And that's why he placed in the word, the Redeemer. Okay, let's go on to the findings. One, from all these biblical verses, we can establish that there are migrants in Israel. Two, there are international migrants, those who are non-Israelites who have settled in Israel. Three, there are internal migrants, Israelis who are not living in their own clan, in their own land. And then we begin to find out that in all these verses, most migrants are poor and defenseless. And that is why there are a lot of laws to protect them. Now, some are also wealthy. And these are the ones that are referred to most of the time as the Ger Tushab. Now, that the stranger is dependent is seen from the following. One, he is counted along on the lowest rung of the social ladder. They are always classified with the widows and the fatherless. Then, the idea is that he has left his family, he has come to a new place to settle, he has no land, so, and possibly no blood relation. Therefore, he becomes vulnerable. So we now have protective legislations. One, if you employ such people, then you have to pay their wages promptly. They must not be oppressed. You must leave remnants of your harvest for them. In fact, as far as the Bible code is concerned, all the four corners cleaning, they shall not be cleaned. They are left for them. Then, if the vine that fell on the vine fruit, the grapefruit that fell on its own is not to be picked up. They are meant for the migrants. Now, then they also participate in the Sabbath, which means God allowed them to rest, even as every other person. And then in this sabbatical year, as well as in the year of Jubilee, they are also to eat out of the abundance of the land. They are not supposed to work throughout all those periods. Now, God has done it so much that by the time you get to Deuteronomy 24, verse 14 to 15, he is already bringing the girl to the status of a sister or a brother. Then, in the legal proceedings, you find this in Deuteronomy 27:19 and some other places, they are to be protected from unfair hearing. And that's very important. Then in the Feast of Weeks and the Feast of Tabernacles, the stranger is counted as a member of the family and a member of the community. So, all right. Now, in putting this under contemporary application, what are we going to say? One, the basis of our relationship to migrants have to be grounded in the leading faith provision. That is, we are also migrants and tenants in God's word. As a result, we must be good to the migrants as the Lord has been good to us. Then two, we must have at the back of our minds that we would give accounts to Yahweh on how we treat the migrants that are in proximity to us. Two, we must also remember that Yahweh loves the migrants. He stated this clearly, that he loves them, and if you mistreat them, he can be angry with you and protect them. So we have to love the migrants as well, and then we have to accept the migrants as part and parcel of the people of God. Three, there is a contemporary dimension that usually go unnoticed that I think we need to bring to the fore. And this is basically our relationship to the people we refer to as our domestic servants, for those who are. Now, in this, I see most of domestic servants as migrants. Why? Basically, they are living in a family to which they do not belong. So even if they are Nigerians, or even they belong to the same tribe as you, they are not part of your family. So as far as your family is concerned, they are migrants into your family. And our relationship has to be one, we accept them as part of our family. And one of the major rules of this is that they should be treated equally. Then I'm posing that we should treat our domestic servants as we would treat our children. And my last poster here is, does that imply that we should get them educated? And I'm concluding by saying that I am not going to form any theological statement, but all these points are brought about here, especially in the contemporary application, is good enough to make any church to form a theological statement or the relationship between the church to the migrants and the church members to the migrants. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor.
Yes, sir.
Ali, we appreciate you for the presentation, and you yielding back 3 minutes. I gave you 5 minutes extra. It's been so wonderful, despite the technical challenges that we have. Quite a number of us are struggling to join us. And also I had issues. That is why I'm joining from my cell phone, as I stated before. It goes to say that we cannot overplan. We must also think about plan A, B, C as we do or plan for or prepare for something. I do not know that even biblical verses, make references to issue of migration. You can see how dynamic and dimensional the issue of migration is in ancient times, contemporary time, and indeed the future as we historicize, contextualize, and critique the multidimensional nature of migration. I have just, okay, I think I have two people that have identified themselves that they have a question or comment. You have to private chat me to be able to speak, please. But before we do, let me also add this, that, reference to the fact that we have to be good to those who come to settle in our area. It's kind of challenging because it's challenging from my perspective in the context of, say for instance, the history of Lagos Island. History of Lagos Island, in the 19th century, we have the abolition of the slave trade and the transatlantic slave trade, which are two different things, but the most important issue is the abolition of slavery or the slave trade, and the ability for those who choose to return or those that were captured on the Atlantic by the British naval ships to be returned to West Coast of Africa. As it concerned my own area of research and my own area of origin, I'm sure that the Daroshas in Lagos Island and the rest of them were accommodated. But the aftermath of that is the fact that they became, in fact, richer than those people that accommodated them. They utilized Western education and what have you. So having said that, I think I will unmute the Vice Chancellor. He was the first to tell us that he has a comment. And I know that, as you all know, his comments are always enriching. So please, sir, you can unmute yourself. If not, I've asked you to unmute yourself. You can unmute yourself. Then the second comment will come from Dr. John Okparaduru. Okparaduru will go second. So the Vice Chancellor, sir.
Thank you very much. I always like to believe that I'm not a Vice Chancellor in these places. I'm just plain vanilla Abdullah Oba Adamu, who just simply wants to be part of an intellectual process, not a Vice Chancellor of a university, because that creates an unnecessary social barrier. Adewale's presentation is very fascinating, and beside the few spelling errors towards the last bits, I think you need to take a look at your, your presentations and make sure that a professor, a person at a professorial level, I know we are not supposed to understand you, okay? That's the whole idea, not to understand you, but at least your spelling should be correct. There are quite a few, for instance, instead of good to us, you said God to us. And you saw it yourself in your conclusion. You saw it. But generally speaking, I like the idea of theology and migration. But I think if you are writing a paper, not just for this presentation, but a paper for a wider consumption, you will enhance the appeal of that paper if you look at general theological issues and migration rather than biblical issue and migration. For instance, in Islam, hijrah, that is migration, is a fundamental tenet in Islam. The Prophet Muhammad, who is the founder of Islamic faith, was forced to move from his birthplace, that's Mecca, to Medina. And when he came back for a pilgrimage to Mecca, the Meccans were very happy that he has returned, and the Medinas were unhappy that he was leaving them. But he said, no, I'm going back to Medina. So he forsook his own fatherland and truly became a migrant to Medina. So I think when you look at this Moses and Egypt and all these kind of things, and for instance, the migration of Moses from Egypt to Israel is there in the Quran also. So the point I'm saying is, let's look at it from a wider lens rather than a narrower lens. When you look at it from, I know you're a biblical scholar and that's your area, but become a religious scholar rather than a biblical scholar. Take a look at, yes, take a look at what other religions say about migration. What about Buddhism? What about Sikhism? What about this? So let's look at religion and migration so that in the final analysis, we'll be able to look at the importance of migration within religion. That's one aspect, one aspect of my comment. The other aspect of my comment is the issue of treatment of our housekeepers, whether a driver or gardener or a house girl or something like that. You brought up very, very strong, not biblical, but moral dimension. There's a difference between biblical. A person could be moral, but not necessarily religious, okay? A person could be ethical, but not necessarily religious. Armed robbers, for instance, could be ethical, but because they could say we will not harm anybody who is old, we will not harm anybody who is a child, but anybody who is between 22 to 40, we will scatter him, you know? So there is an ethical barrier that they have. So the question is, when you bring in a small girl to wash your plates, and your daughter has a beautiful lunch box that she uses to go to school, okay, with bread, butter, bombita, Milo, and all those good things inside. And that tiny girl from a village was restricted to your kitchen, where she only picks scrap of the food that you have eaten. Are you being biblical, or are you being moral, or are you being ethical? Would you give her the same kind of treatment that you are giving to your daughter? But is it your moral imperative to provide her with the same kind of treatment, or what? So I think we need to look at these knotty issues. Because if you bring the idea of a religion into it, then you are giving it a religious significance. But what is the difference, therefore, between a religious obligation and social obligation? If you're going to educate this child, will you educate this child in the same way that you educate your own child? Will you take this girl that you have brought in to look after your baby, will you take her to London just like you take your daughter to London, or would you not? You know, so what is your moral imperative? What is the difference between biblical imperative and moral imperative and social imperative? You mixed up the whole sort of thing. So the Bible is very clear on what you should do, what your responsibilities are. But then the society is also very clear on that. So we need, because various, in England, for instance, they believe in the Bible, right? But they don't have housekeepers. And even if they do, there is a particular rate that they pay for housekeepers. But here, it is today you kick off this housekeep, tomorrow you kick off that housekeep. So I think generally speaking, your paper is fine from a biblical perspective. I like it. I like the idea of a biblical look at migration. But I think in order to reach it, you need to expand and look at religious migration rather than biblical migration. Because there is a lot of migration. People are running away. Like Boko Haram, you don't even have to go to the Bible and the Quran. In Borno, for instance, people are running away because of religion. Okay? They are being displaced by Boko Haram, and that is all insurgency. Syria is also facing problems because of religious crisis. And you also have Westerners, people who were born in Pakistan, in the Middle East, in the Muslim countries, but bred in America and Europe, joining ISIS in Syria. They are joining them. They are becoming migrants. We have people from I think Sokoto, is it, or somewhere, the child of one justice, who and his family migrated from northern Nigeria all the way to Syria, and he was killed. So we tend to look at religion and migration rather than Bible and migration, because you'll be leaving yourself open to attack. Like I said, I know you're a biblical scholar, and I like that. But expand your scope so that we can understand what other scriptures say about migration and how they are handled. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Abdallah Adamu, for that insightful comments. We really appreciate you. The next person will be Dr. John. After Dr. John, Professor Emeritus Sogolo has indicated, and he will go after Dr. John. Dr. John, please. I've unmuted you. Dr. John Okparaduru. Can you unmute yourself?
Yes, sir. Yes, Prof. I can now unmute myself. Thank you, sir. In the first instance, I want to thank our Vice Chancellor on this platform.
No, just go straight.
The center.
You had his admonition. Don't thank anybody. Go straight to your question.
Okay, Prof. One of the things I wanted to say was looking at the topic of this presentation from the concept of religion than the way it is presented, because it's as if it's more of a Christian theological perspective to migration. And I want to thank the Vice Chancellor that he has actually taken deep to that. Then I have one question. You said in the book of Deuteronomy 25:5 that if brothers dwell together and one of them dies and did not have a son, and that the other brother should go ahead and marry the wife and then do everything the husband's supposed to do. Then my question is this: does it mean that if the wife of the brother has got a son already, then she can be allowed to remarry to another place? That's my second question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You've just asked one question about the economy. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Four was just complimentary, which we've been admonished, no complimentary of the first questionnaire. Professor Sogolo, please. I've asked you to unmute yourself, sir. Professor Sogolo. Can you unmute yourself, sir?
Okay. Are you hearing me now?
Yes, we can.
Oh, okay. Now, you see, I had earlier in these presentations advised that Professor Abdallah Uba Adamu should always speak last, because his brain runs very fast and he gets into all the ideas we all have in our minds. And that's a problem for many of us. The issue I wanted to take up, he has already raised. Now, first of all, I want to apologize to him that in my last presentation, I spelled his name, Umba, rather than Uba. And I'm very sorry about that. That was a mistake. I really thought that he was an Igbo man. Now, the issue, the issue of mixing up secular, cultural, moral laws and regulations is very much, one of the problems that Professor Adewale really is facing, because he has seemed to have, joined all of them, so such that he didn't know when he was talking about a secular law, something that has to do with the Jewish secular laws or morality or religious, law. So that we need to make clear. I agree that he needs to specialize. I mean, if you're really talking about religious something generally, it becomes rather nebulous. But if you restrict it and say the Christian or biblical and so forth, then you have specialized in that. It is, when scholars of comparative religion are talking, comparative religions are talking, then they're making a comparative analysis. But, since he's a specialized person in, biblical studies, it's obvious why he's making this kind of, why he's narrowing it down to biblical interpretations. But I really very much wish to say that he has to still make this distinction between, laws and practices that purely social or secular, make a distinction between those ones and those that are religious, so that we'll be clear and say, okay, this is something that strictly is in the Bible. But although it's possible that some of them will cut across, that you have a purely secular law, which is derived or has, which is derivable or, originated from, from the scripture. So you have some that you find difficult to separate totally. I agree on that. But I think, for instance, when he was talking about the eating of dead animals, that's a pure hygienic rule. You're talking about something that has to do with, medicine.
What's up?
You have that written, if you really want to make strict as a rule. And what is religious? I just want to make this clear about, how you can make some of these distinctions, which are very difficult to make. I agree. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Emeritus Professor Sogolo. Professor Adewale, you can respond while I take the next
all right, sir.
comment.
Okay, let me start by telling the Vice Chancellor that what I actually did was to call on Dr. Ajani
excuse me,
that
sir.
he should work on the Islamic.
Let us be politically
Yes,
and educationally and learningly, if there's any word such as that, correct.
Yes,
you
sir.
respond to the first speaker, Professor Abdallah Uba Adamu, not the Vice Chancellor.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, I understand, sir. So what I did was to immediately call Dr. Ajani, one of the scholars in Islamic studies, to prepare a paper for this forum, bringing in the Islamic aspects on migrants. And that when he finished, the two of us will sit down to harmonize our paper so that we'll have something like a Christian and Islamic or a religious perspective on that issue, because I understand that aspect that it exists. Then, so we are going to do that, sir. I believe we will do that. There's no problem. But whatever I have done has been done on the basis of biblical theology. But let me say this also. Now, if we look at my paper from the modern mind, which has done a lot of that, which has presented dichotomy between what is religious and what is secular, then we'll be having the problems we are having now. As far as the Jews are concerned, and as far as Christianity should be concerned, there should be no demarcation between the religious and the secular, because God expects me to live like a Christian in everything. So, as a staff of National Open University, I must do my work as a Christian. So what is forming my dictate is my belief, my biblical belief that is forming my dictates. So, and that's why we still have problems today. I can be a Christian, I can decide not to live by the laws of the Bible. But if I live by the laws of the Bible, I will have fulfilled over 98% of social and national laws. So we need to also understand that the grand religion, I mean the grand of everything is actually our faith, where we are coming from. And that's why in some of the passages that I have raised, you will see God say, do this because I am the Lord your God. So they are not doing it because of any social reason. They are doing it because God says it has to be done. Now let me address the issue of the levirate marriage. Well, apart from the biblical injunction, I am a Yoruba man, and I know that traditionally, again, something which modernity has destroyed, traditionally, we have a responsibility to marry the wife of a deceased brother. Now, this is done in the society for protection means. And honestly, they do it when they think that the wife is a responsible woman who is loved by everybody, and they don't want her to go outside the family and marry. However, because of modern day, the tradition is gone. So only very few people still uphold this tradition. So I don't think there's anything. And let me say again, if the woman says she doesn't like anybody in that family, most of the time, if she wants to go outside, they allow her to go outside. But keeping the family intact is one of the major things that keep that law. Thank you. I will adhere strictly. I know that I can approach this paper from other dimensions. Yeah. So I will see what I can do. But I promise we'll be working on towards a more global paper,
very much.
Which will be the issue of religion.
Professor Adewale,
Yes,
we are taking 2 more questions or comments. The first one from Dr. Just listen, please. Dr. Chukuma, Nena Chukuma. I will unmute you, and then Dr. Rosemary Saibu. I can see those 2 hands up, so let me go ahead and unmute them. Dr. Nena, where are you again? Just 1 second, please. Okay. I've asked you to unmute yourself, ma'am, Dr. Chukuma. HOD beside me. Okay.
Morning,
Please go ahead, ma'am.
Good morning, sir. Prof, good morning, sir. Okay. My question first is on Leviticus 22.
Your voice is too low.
Oh.
A question is on Leviticus 22, verse whatever.
Yes, Leviticus 22:10, where Prof. Sir talked about an outsider shall not eat of a holy thing, a sojourner of the priest, or a hired servant, and all that. And now I am saying that, or I want to ask, that place, does it really refer to migrants or people within the land? Because that place, from the explanation Prof made, he actually refers to this same category of people as people who had come from outside, whereas ordinarily, these are not people, as it is stated there, these are not people coming from outside. For me, those people have nothing to do with migration actually, because it could be maybe, let me say a community, people within that community who actually maybe came to the king's house or the priest's house that are not necessarily migrants from somewhere. That's number one. And then number two, I'm actually looking at the relationship between biblical aspect of migration as we had learned today, and the atheist or agonist. How do you know? Because these are people who do not believe in everything that we had said here today. So how do you now reconcile or accommodate those people? How do you now bring them into this context that we are discussing here now? Thank you, sir.
Okay, Dr. Shaibu, go ahead.
Good morning, House. I'm Dr. Rosemary Saidu. I want to appreciate Amiable Vice Chancellor, Professor Adamu Abdal, Professor Emerita, Professor Sogolo, the Director, Center of Excellence, Professor Tijani. And I want to thank Professor Adewale, the presenter, a senior colleague, and also a senior ex-center director, because we were formerly center directors. My own contribution is I want to appreciate him for the wonderful presentation, because he has really dealt with the topic in a very good way, religious migration. But my contribution is that we should look at Ruth chapter 1, the book of Ruth. Ruth was a migrant. She wasn't an Israelite. She married an Israelite, and eventually the husband died. And when she came in with her mother-in-law, she was able to get married to an Israelite. So Professor Adewale should look at that. That will buttress his point. I really appreciate him, and I enjoyed the topic. Thank you very much, sir, the director, for giving me opportunity to contribute. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, ma'am. Please, Professor Adewale, can you respond to the last two speakers so that we can round up?
All right, thank you very much, sir. Let me begin with Dr. Nena's suggestion. Now, on the issue of let me start from the background. The holy thing is actually the portion of the tithes that was given to the priest from the temple, which was supposed to be for the sustenance of himself and his family. However, it is understood that the household of the priest includes people who are non-priest related. And these are the sakir, that is the hired laborer who is living within the priest household. These are the people that are referred to as migrants. Because if he has his house in the same place, he will have no reason to live in the house of the priest. So as far as the priest family is concerned, he is a migrant. He is only living there because he is working with that family. And that's why they are excluded. Now, and even apart from this, the law is actually so strict. Even if the priest's daughter marries a non-priest, whether internal migrant or external migrant, the husband of the priest's daughter cannot partake of the holy thing. So the understanding of the migrant is very clear there. Then, how do I relate to those who doesn't believe in God? Thank God that the Professor Obadamu and Professor Soglo and Dr. John have commented that there are so many things that can be classified under moral, social. So if we are not appealing to them from the biblical perspective, we can appeal to them from the moral and the social aspects. And Dr. Saibu's contribution is welcomed. When I was thinking on writing this paper, I had so many approaches that I could have taken. And one of the approaches is to have looked at specific migrants who are fully integrated into the family of God or into the people of God. And even before Ruth, we had Rahab the harlot, whose entire family was actually specifically added to the Hebrew family. But I prefer Ruth too, because Ruth's case is it's a very wonderful case. And apart from that, she is one of the few outsiders who has become part and parcel of the family of Jesus Christ. Because by the time you begin to talk about Ruth, we have to make reference to the great-grandfather of Jesus. So
okay.
It's something we can handle in a paper on its own entirely. I have to be focused, I have to be limited, so I cannot take in every possible things that talk about migrants in the Bible. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, Professor Adewale. I would like to thank Dr. Rosemary Saibu and Challenger to give us a paper on this selected individual or just an individual. I think it's another aspect that we need to look into. And as you do that, you begin to look at a mix or the validation of a concept tagged biographical pedagogical discourse, and then looking at Ruth and others in the Bible, or looking at others in the Quran or any of the other holy books, and then make a presentation. I think it will be so unique, dynamic, and I believe learning will have occurred. I strongly believe learning occurred today as usual. I'd like to thank the presenter for this wonderful job, despite the challenges that I don't want to mention, and the tinkering about approaches to his paper eventually. I would like to thank our usual participants and the new ones. Be rest assured that the PowerPoint is on WhatsApp group, is also on Telegram group. And in the next 1 hour or so, my technical assistant and myself will have come up editing the recording and then post on YouTube. And for the new people joining us, the Center of Excellence in Migration and Global Studies is a research center, but looking at migration in the context of global studies, looking at migration in the context of multidisciplinary nature of the subject matter. And that is why we've had people in science, in social science, in humanities, in art, in Greek. In fact, Professor Joktan has promised me this morning to send something to us. So please, you are most welcome to send to us. We are fully booked till the second week in November. So if you plan to be part of this process, kindly let us know, and I will most welcome and be delighted to have you. Again, thank you very much. Let me unmute everyone. So as we round up, and we thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
God bless you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, Prof.
Bye-bye, Prof.
God bless.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Director, bye-bye.